Let's get salty!
Hey everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and finally we have some news, and pretty huge news at that. We got a bunch of cards getting reverted, buffed, or at least one card getting buffed, and we have way more coming in the next few days. But before we go into that, before we get into this big news, Shmems here won the giveaway from a couple videos back, winning the mega bundle. I haven't heard from this person yet, so if I don't hear from them, I will pick another comment within 24 hours, so stay tuned for that. And I want to up the ante. If we can hit 25,000 subs by the time the expansion comes out, I will be gifting a whole lot more. So stay subbed, hit that sub button. We'll do an even bigger giveaway than the mega bundle if we can hit 25K before the next expansion comes out. Anyways, all right, so what is the big news? What is the absolute mega news? Well, we knew that they were going to revert a bunch of cards for Wild. Well, they have done a bunch of that. Alec Dawson here announced on Twitter a bunch of reverts. They're going to announce a bunch more. They only cover 2 classes so far, but there's a lot of other news within this. They mentioned that a lot of these cards, or some of these cards, are going to come back. He mentioned specifically Mana Worm and Flame Tongue. They're cards that they plan on bringing back, so they're going to adjust them differently. They're not going to be completely reverted. We'll show you with Mana Worm as an example. They also mentioned that no Demon Hunter cards will be reverted. They're all staying nerfed, and as I predicted, that's exactly what's happening, and it's good. I mean, they had to figure out what was too broken about Demon Hunter when it came out. Some of it seemed glaringly obvious, Skull of Gul'dan, but you know, it is what it is, and at least they're not reverting any. So they also mentioned that they don't want to really give cards to decks that are already really, really good in Wild. So they use this example as Level Up would make Odd Paladin even better. It's already like a tier 1 deck. They don't really want to do that, so you're not going to see cards that should be like supporting already tier 1 archetypes return to Wild yet. Maybe down the road, but not yet as it is. The main purpose of this is basically to let you play decks of old that you basically can't play anymore. Will that accomplish that? Well, let's get into it. This video will cover all of the cards that are being reverted, and I will rate their impact, how I feel they will impact the Wild meta going forward, whether it breaks the format or basically does nothing. So let's get into it, and there will be more reverts announced on Twitter, so I'll link Alec Dawson's Twitter below if you want to follow him there to keep up to date, but I'll probably keep you guys posted on YouTube as well, giving reviews on all the reverts as they come out. So starting off with the Druid cards, there are 2 cards being reverted. Both were predicted by us in our prediction video. First being Ancient of Lore will now draw 2 cards. And you can restore 5 health with choose 1. That's how it used to be. And this card I don't think will have absolutely any impact on the Wild meta. Even if you were to play Quest Druid, which is basically not a thing, I don't think this is fast enough. You would rather just play a 6-mana Nurse. There's so many other good effects. I don't think Ancient of Lore will make any impact whatsoever, but it's getting reverted and it's a nice touch. And the other Druid card to get reverted is Keeper of the Grove. Originally was a 2/4. As you can see here, it's been a 2/2 for a while. Becomes a 2/4. Now Druid has a decent silent option, but again, like if you look at Druid decks in Wild, they're either token based or they're like Jade, Togwaggle, and they love the Oaken Summons package. The Oaken Summons package is just so good, and I don't think I can't think of a Druid deck that would really want to utilize a silence rather than just playing Oaken Summons into Vargoth, Zuldrak, or Hecklebot, or whatever you want to play. I just can't see this being a thing. Maybe in some like jank Highlander Druid, but again, silence isn't that impactful. I can't see it, so again, it's nice it's being reverted, but I don't think this will have any impact on the Wild meta at all. Next, we have 4 Hunter cards are being reverted. First, Dino Tamer Bran, recently nerfed to 8 mana, already being reverted to 7. This is a change I love to see. You can now Bran. This card never fell out of line in Wild whatsoever. It's very powerful, but I mean, it's Wild. You should be able to do powerful things. And yeah, it's enabled now. You still have Stitch Tracker to get more of these guys in it. It should do some work. I think this will give Highlander Hunter a bit more of a boost again. It's never been a top tier deck, but it's always been like close, and it's a good deck to counter Secret Mage. It's always been good for that, but other than that, it's always struggled. But Bran being at 7 gives it a little bit more of that early reach that it needs to do, basically to deal lethal damage to a lot of these greedier decks. So big change, and I do think this will help elevate Hunter just a little bit. Definitely will have an impact in the Wild meta. Next is probably the biggest change out of all of the changes is Starving Buzzard is being reverted. 5 mana 3/2 whenever you summon a beast, draw a card. It is now 3 mana cheaper and is a 2/1. This card was extremely powerful back in the old days before I even played Hearthstone. I have never played an unnerfed Starving Buzzard, and well, I'll be able to. It's really hard to evaluate the impact of this card being at 2 mana in today's game. Yes, it was busted in like 2015, 2014. But in today's game, I don't know. Obviously, with like Unleash the Hounds, you have like Spring Paw. You have that card. You could play 2 of those. You draw 2 cards. That seems incredibly powerful. One of the things Hunter struggles with is card draw, and Starving Buzzard just eliminates that in a heartbeat. This could be a potential game-breaking change in Wild for Hunter. They have been awful, been terrible, and well, Blizzard's like, you know what? Let's throw them a bone and give them the most broken card they've probably ever had that we've nerfed. And I really struggle to evaluate Starving Buzzard, but I think it will be a major player in Wild. The fact that you get that cheap draw, like this is ridiculously cheap draw. You could play this in a Master's Call deck. It's a beast. You draw all these other cheap pieces. It seems ridiculous, and Hunter might finally be playable in Wild. Is that a good or bad thing? Of course it's a good thing. We all love the smart, right? So yeah, Starving Buzzard change, huge deal. Look out for Hunter after this. And lastly, Flare is 2 mana going to 1 mana. So a little bit more flexibility. Hunter was already good at dealing with like Secret Mage, and this just makes it a little bit better. You can play around Counterspell a little bit better if you have Flare at 1. It's a little bit more flexible. Say on 3, you have a Secret and you have Flare. Well, you can test for Counterspell, get rid of that secret, and then get rid of the other secrets, for example. And it's cheap draw. All of a sudden, Hunter has some decent draw options in Wild. So again, this is a significant change, and I think it's a good one as well. Hunter needs the help in Wild, so let's see what happens. So definitely another card that will have an impact. And Hunter's Mark is going from 2 mana to 1, not back to 0 though. It originally was 0 way back in the day. It's on that middle ground. I don't think this has a huge impact. I don't think you're running Hunter's Mark again with your Candle Shot, but maybe it's cheap enough removal that it's worth considering, but we'll have to wait and see. Of all the reverted nerfs for Hunter, I think this is the least impactful, but again, not bad at all, and definitely could see some play. So Hunter gets a lot of help in Wild, and they absolutely need it. So thumbs up from me. And then we have Mage Cards. There's 3 Mage Cards being reverted. First is Dragon Caster going from 7 mana to 6. This was infamous with Pocket Galaxy, and will likely go back into that style of deck where you can coin out Dragon Caster on 5 and cheat out Pocket Galaxy and do ridiculous stuff. The card was never super powerful in that archetype back, like with the Reno Pocket Galaxy Mage. It was good, but definitely wasn't like carrying it, and it'll help out. It'll, give that deck a little bit more juice because it could cheat stuff out a bit sooner, but I wouldn't hold your breath on making that deck like super tier 1 again. Conjurer's Calling goes from 4 mana to 3 mana. Conjurers has never really seen much play in Wild, even when it was 3 mana. I saw some play in like Odd Mage, which can run this again now, but again, those like Cyclone, Conjurers decks, they're typically a little bit too slow, a little too bit vulnerable to aggro in Wild, and I could see that remaining the same thing, but if you could maybe justify it in a Reno Pocket Galaxy Mage now because it's a little bit cheaper, and maybe it works there. So Conjurer's Calling, although hasn't seen a ton of play in Wild either way, I think this, with all the additional tools Mage has got over the last like year or so, could find its way in there in these greedy Highlander decks. So look out for Conjurers. It might pop back up. And lastly, when I first saw this, I was a little bit worried, and then they mentioned that Mana Worm going back from 2 mana to 1 mana, but because it's a card they want to bring back to standard as Flame Tongue, which we'll find out about later, I'm guessing that'll be 0/2 or something. It's now a 1/2. It's not a 1/3, so very vulnerable to a lot of stuff. Just dies to like a backstab, for instance. But when you have cards like Apprentice, Evocation, Primordial Glyph, Magic Trick, all these incredibly cheap spells that weren't around back in the day to buff Mana Worm, it still could be incredibly powerful, and maybe those Secret Mages might even run it. It's just a 1-drop you can play on 1 into Arcanologist, who knows? Even at a 1/2, this card definitely has potential. It's completely dead as a 2 mana 1/3. 1 mana 1/2, look out, it might see a bit of play, but again, that vulnerability just dies to Odd Rogue's Dagger. Might be a little bit too much to make it viable in such a hyper-aggressive, and like, it's got to be the nuts in Wild to see play, so I'm not entirely sure if Mana Worm will make the cut. And we're also seeing 1 card getting buffed, Worm Weaver. This is a Mage card currently in Standard. It's going to go from a 5 mana 3/6 to a 4 mana 3/5 and give you 2 1/2 mana worms. So might make sense as to why mana worm got changed, as you can see with this card. So yeah, there you have it. That's a pretty impressive buff. This card will be playable. Like at 4, this card was always borderline. At 5 mana borderline, now making it 1 mana cheaper, 1 less health. This card I could see being quite impactful in standard. Not so much wild, but definitely in standard. And it's 1 less high roll for Jandis. So maybe my my issues video made the impact and they're doing that because of this. Absolutely not, but 1 less high roll for Jandis, and I think we're all thankful for that. But that's it. That's all the reverted nerfs so far. They'll announce more. Probably Alec Dawson will on Twitter, and we'll keep you up to date. I'll give you my reviews on them as we come along, and hopefully we get some announcements on new cards for Forge of the Barons as well. We want that news, but until we have it, I'll keep you guys posted. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day, and stay salty, my friends.